That night was meant to be forgettable, a polite gathering wrapped in routine smiles and predictable conversations. I arrived relaxed, expecting nothing more than small talk and tired jokes. The room felt familiar, almost safe, filled with people who had shared meals and holidays with us. I trusted the setting because history lowers guard. I did not know I was walking into a moment designed to humiliate rather than entertain, staged carefully and timed for maximum damage without warning signs. Then everything shifted in seconds. My wife stepped forward, smiling too calmly, her hand already reaching. Fabric ripped under her fingers, and the sound cut through the room. My shirt opened as if permission had been granted. Laughter followed immediately, loud and united, coming from friends who already knew about her lover standing nearby. No one looked surprised. Faces showed anticipation, not shock, as if this scene had been rehearsed before I entered, and everyone waited for my reaction silently. I felt the heat of attention more than the torn fabric. Standing there, I understood exposure is not about skin but status. Their laughter was not spontaneous, it was approval. At 40 plus, you recognize patterns younger people miss. This was not a mistake or drunken impulse. It was a public statement meant to reduce me. When respect is removed in front of witnesses, it is an execution, not an argument, and it leaves marks deeper than noise forever remembered. I did not shout or defend myself. Experience teaches that dignity does not survive performance. I watched who laughed freely and who laughed out of fear. I noticed who avoided my eyes and who leaned closer to her lover. Silence became my shield. In moments like this, restraint is not weakness, it is measurement. I was already calculating distance, exits, and consequences while they were enjoying the illusion of control they believed permanent and celebrating my supposed collapse loudly together. That was the instant something inside me detached. Humiliation has a sound when it crosses into clarity. I knew the evening was no longer social, it was decisive. The man standing there was not begging for respect, he was observing its absence. At this age, lessons arrive without warning and stay for life. This was one of them. A line had been crossed publicly, and nothing after that could ever return to normal for me again, ever under any circumstances. I did not raise my voice even when instinct demanded noise and movement from me. I stayed still because experience teaches that stillness unnerves cruelty faster than confrontation. The room expected a scene, and I denied them that satisfaction. My silence forced them to look at themselves instead of me. At this stage of life, control is measured by what you refuse to perform. They waited and I did nothing. That choice shifted the balance immediately inside the room. Silently, I watched reactions instead of faces as laughter continued behind me. Some laughed too loudly, trying to prove loyalty to her. Others laughed briefly, then stopped when they noticed my calm. A few avoided eye contact because guilt reveals itself quietly. These details matter more than words once you pass 40. Patterns become clearer, and excuses lose power. I memorized every reaction, knowing memory would guide decisions later. Nothing escapes attention when pride is already gone and focus sharpens without emotion or hesitation from anyone present there tonight. I chose to walk away slowly, not to escape, but to conclude. Walking calmly after humiliation confuses people who expect collapse. Their laughter followed me for a moment, then weakened. Sound loses confidence when it meets indifference. I felt their certainty crack behind my back. Silence can be louder than shouting when it is intentional. I did not look back because endings deserve forward motion. That exit was the first decision of many made without witnesses or approval, and it restored internal balance I had lost briefly there. They believe calm meant surrender because they underestimate maturity. At 40 plus, restraint is strategy, not fear. I left them celebrating a victory that existed only in their minds. Silence follows you longer than insults follow them. They would replay my lack of reaction repeatedly. Questions grow in rooms where certainty once lived. That discomfort would expand quietly after I was gone. I trusted time because it always exposes misjudgment without effort from the patient man who waits calmly. Always they thought restraint meant weakness, and that assumption sealed everything. I understood power differently long before that night. Real strength chooses when to respond and when to disappear. Walking away was not retreat, it was position. I was already finished explaining myself to anyone there. Age teaches that dignity survives only where it is protected. Their laughter became irrelevant the moment I chose silence. That mistake they made would echo beyond that evening in ways they could not predict. Then outside the noise faded, but my body refused to follow. Air felt thinner with every step, and my breathing shifted into something shallow and uneven. My chest tightened as if a weight had been placed there deliberately. Hands that had been steady moments earlier turned cold and unfamiliar. This was no longer embarrassment or pride. It was my nervous system reacting to a public threat. At this age, you learn that the body never negotiates with denial for long anyway. I leaned against a wall and realized standing required more effort than it should. The ground felt unstable though it had not moved. Sweat formed without heat, and my heartbeat demanded attention I could not ignore. People underestimate what betrayal does when it happens under witnesses. The mind can pretend strength, but the body keeps its own record. I sat down slowly, not for comfort, but because gravity had become persuasive and insistent in a way that demanded respect. Behind me, someone laughed again, trying to revive the mood. I did not process the words, only the tone sharp, careless, dismissive. That sound cut deeper than the torn shirt because it arrived after the damage was done. I focused on breathing, counting each inhale like a task that required discipline. Passing years teach you that control begins with breath when everything else slips. I refused panic, but I also refused pretense about what was happening. Time stretched strangely as minutes lost their shape. I noticed details with unnatural clarity: the pavement texture, the smell of night air, the rhythm of distant traffic. My hands trembled slightly, and I folded them together to hide it from myself. Pride becomes irrelevant when survival signals activate. This was not drama, it was consequence. The body responds honestly to public betrayal long before the mind finds explanations or defenses. Someone finally stepped closer and asked if I was all right. Concern replaced laughter, and confusion replaced confidence. That shift mattered. Authority changes when vulnerability appears unexpectedly. I nodded without speaking, conserving energy and clarity. In that moment, I understood something lasting. Silence had protected my dignity inside the room, but outside my body delivered its verdict. Experience teaches you to listen when it speaks, because ignoring it only delays truth and makes recovery harder later. This was the point where events stopped being social and became medical without permission from anyone present there that night. The sirens arrived before explanations could form, and their sound cut through the night with authority. Conversations stopped mid-sentence, and laughter collapsed into silence. Lights flashed against faces that moments earlier enjoyed cruelty. The air shifted instantly because urgency does not negotiate. I watched people step aside without instruction, as if instinct recognized hierarchy. In one moment, the gathering lost its casual mask. Something serious had entered, and everyone felt it without needing words or direction from anyone. Their paramedics moved with practiced calm, carrying equipment that transformed the space immediately. Their voices were low, precise, and unquestionable. Questions came quickly: names, symptoms, time frames. No one joked now. People who had laughed stood frozen, unsure where to place themselves. My wife reacted before anyone else, her expression draining of confidence, as authority replaced social power. When professionals take control, pretenses disappear. Reality becomes structured, measured, and unavoidable, and every witness understands the shift instinctively. In that exact moment, attention turned toward me, not with mockery, but assessment. Space opened as bodies moved back, allowing work to happen. Someone asked for water, another cleared a path. The same room that encouraged humiliation now obeyed instructions without protest. I noticed how quickly courage disappears when accountability enters. Laughter had required no responsibility. This required focus. Competence has gravity, and everyone adjusted their posture around it quietly, including those who minutes earlier felt untouchable and learned silence again. Very quickly their sirens faded, but their impact remained inside the room. The night air felt heavier as plans dissolved. Conversations became whispers, then stopped entirely. My wife stood still, watching control leave her reach. When laughter dies abruptly, it leaves embarrassment behind. Faces showed regret, calculation, and fear. No one looked entertained anymore. Authority had redrawn the hierarchy without argument. What had been a spectacle became an incident, and everyone understood permanence had entered the moment, could not be reversed again. Later in that shift, I understood why silence mattered earlier. Noise belongs to the careless, but restraint survives crisis. What happened next would not be shared as gossip. It would be remembered as consequence. The gathering would replay this reversal long after the night ended. For me, it confirmed something final. Public cruelty collapses the moment real authority appears. Laughter is brave only in safe rooms. That night, safety vanished and truth stood exposed before everyone involved understood the cost fully. As they began examining me, the room compressed into silence and attention narrowed. Medical language replaced opinion and stripped the scene of theater. Numbers mattered, tone mattered, timing mattered. Blood pressure was read aloud and noted twice. Pulse was checked again. The calm cadence of assessment slowed everything. People stopped whispering. Chairs scraped softly as space was cleared. Authority does that. It resets behavior without asking permission and leaves no room for performance or bravado from anyone present there tonight. The lover shifted first, losing his voice and posture at once. He stared at the floor as terms he could not influence filled the air. My wife attempted to speak, then stopped mid-breath, realizing control had left her hands. When competence arrives, social confidence evaporates. The crowd learned the difference between amusement and consequence. No one smiled. No one filmed. Respect returned not for me, but for the process unfolding steadily under bright lights and measured questions nearby witnesses. I noticed how power rearranged the room without effort. Those who had laughed leaned back, creating distance. Conversations ended unfinished. Phones stayed in pockets. Eyes followed instructions, not personalities. Experience teaches that authority speaks quietly. The paramedics worked methodically, asking dates, medications, triggers. Each answer grounded the moment further. With every note taken, arrogance lost footing. The night changed categories, moving from gossip to record, making consequences permanent, visible, and impossible to dismiss later. For everyone watching closely in silence, for the first time that evening, entertainment vanished completely. No reactions were rewarded. No alliances mattered. The room obeyed procedure. I felt neither triumph nor relief, only clarity. Humiliation had summoned witnesses, but professionalism summoned truth. My wife stood still, absorbing the shift. The lover remained irrelevant. When systems engage, individuals shrink. That realization aged everyone present instantly, including me, observing quietly as the weight of consequences settled across the space, without argument, excuses, or laughter remaining anywhere at all. In that silence, arrogance finally collapsed inward. Social power dissolved when measured facts replaced noise. I understood then why restraint matters later. The evening stopped being about humiliation and became documentation. People remember moments when certainty breaks. They remember who held authority. That night taught a lasting lesson. Entertainment fades fast. Consequence stays. For those watching, control changed hands without violence or words, leaving reputations altered and futures uncertain in quiet, irreversible ways for everyone involved there. From that moment, lying there, I stopped guessing and started seeing. Faces arranged themselves without effort. Some leaned closer, checking my breathing genuinely. Others watched the door, calculating outcomes. Concern and self-interest look similar until pressure separates them. Age sharpens that distinction mercilessly. I no longer searched for motives or excuses. I watched behavior in real time and accepted it as truth. That clarity arrived calmly, without anger, disappointment, or surprise, because experience had prepared me for it already. Long before tonight, I noticed who spoke softly and who avoided speaking at all. Silence revealed priorities better than declarations ever could. One friend asked practical questions and waited for answers. Another checked his phone repeatedly, pretending concern. My wife stood apart, scanning faces not mine. The lover stayed still, unsure where to place his hands. In moments like this, loyalty exposes itself quietly, and memory records every detail permanently, without commentary. Because time pressure removes masks completely from people instantly under stress, there was no anger left inside me, only a clean emptiness. Anger requires hope, and I had passed that stage. I was not disappointed because disappointment assumes expectation. What I felt was closure forming naturally. The scene had answered questions I never asked aloud. I understood who would stand beside me when comfort was inconvenient. I also understood who would disappear once consequences demanded accountability and patience, without excuses, delays, or emotional noise. Later on again in my life, forward age gives permission to stop romanticizing behavior. You no longer label cruelty as misunderstanding or call indifference complexity. You measure patterns and accept results. Lying there, I felt finished negotiating reality. The need to explain myself evaporated completely. I did not feel small or defeated. I felt accurate. Accuracy is underrated, but it keeps you safe. That night stripped away narrative and left only verified truth without emotion distortion or unnecessary interpretation from anyone present in that room that night. I was not angry anymore, because anger ties you to people who hurt you. I was done. Finished does not mean broken. It means released. Seeing people clearly ends confusion permanently. At 40 plus, clarity becomes survival, not philosophy. I understood that moving forward required silence, distance, and memory. What I saw that night would guide every decision after. I left that space internally before my body moved anywhere else without regret, hesitation, or emotional return. From that moment onward, I left with the paramedics without announcing anything or looking back. The stretcher wheels rolled slowly, and that sound replaced every unfinished sentence behind me. No speech was owed. No explanation was required. Years teach you that exits matter more than entrances. Walking away calmly after humiliation confuses people who expect collapse. My stillness was deliberate. I allowed professionals to lead while I conserved energy and dignity. Silence followed me like weight rather than absence. In that moment alone, intentionally inside the room, I knew conversations restarted cautiously the moment I disappeared. Confusion replaced celebration. People replayed my lack of reaction, searching for meaning. My wife lost her audience instantly. The lover lost relevance just as quickly. Silence unsettles louder than anger because it invites reflection. I did not need to witness their discomfort. Distance does the work better than confrontation, especially when pride has already overplayed its hand publicly and left questions lingering long after the night ended completely and the ambulance lights flashed rhythmically and time slowed again. There was no space for regret, only assessment. I focused on breathing and listened to instructions without resistance. Leaving without drama protected something essential. I refused to give humiliation an encore. At this age, walking away is not avoidance, it is alignment. You choose environments that do not require defense. That decision begins the moment you exit quietly, understanding consequences arrive later, without announcements or negotiations or explanations ever again. They would ask questions later among themselves, trying to reframe the night. Why did he not react? Why did he leave calmly? Those questions linger longer than insults. I was no longer part of that discussion. Walking away quietly closes debates permanently. When you do not defend yourself, narratives collapse. I trusted time to handle what words never could. Maturity teaches patience because truth surfaces eventually, without pursuit from those willing to wait, and observe silently afterward, always alone first. I left without drama because drama keeps you tied to people who disrespect you. Selection is quieter. You choose what no longer deserves access. That night marked separation, not from a place, but from a version of myself willing to tolerate humiliation. Walking away preserved my future. At 40 plus, peace outweighs performance. I did not lose anything valuable. I removed myself carefully. That is how dignity survives and strength endures long after noise fades and crowds forget everything else. That night did not end a marriage, it ended illusions I carried quietly for years. I learned that explanation is a currency wasted on people who celebrate cruelty as strength. Experience teaches that humiliation is never accidental, it is permission granted by character. Public moments expose truth faster than private promises. At 40 plus, lessons arrive. Without drama, they settle in calmly and remain permanent. I stopped asking why and started accepting what was shown. The need to be understood disappeared and relief replaced it. Understanding is optional. Dignity is not. Silence became my final answer and my permanent protection. Looking back, the lesson was not about pain but clarity. Public humiliation functions like a spotlight. It reveals alliances, motives, and limits instantly. People show who they are when laughter feels safe and accountability feels distant. Authority arriving that night changed everything. Because competence strips away arrogance immediately, I watched power shift without arguments or insults. That is how real order works, quietly, efficiently, and without emotion. For a mature man, this realization is grounding. It teaches patience, restraint, and the value of choosing absence over reaction. Some lessons arrive once, then guide every decision for the rest of life. What stayed with me most was the calm that followed. Walking away closed doors permanently without slamming them. Time did the rest. Reputation rearranged itself naturally when facts replaced stories. I did not seek revenge because life handles imbalance efficiently when you stop interfering. Maturity understands timing better than emotion. By refusing to return, I preserved something greater than pride. I preserved direction forward. Movement requires letting rooms echo. Without you, peace grows where boundaries are respected, and absence teaches louder than confrontation ever could. That understanding becomes a compass guiding choices long after witnesses forget the night, entirely forever. The lesson that stays is simple and unforgiving. Dignity does not announce itself, and it does not beg for validation. It survives through selection. You choose what no longer touches you. You protect peace by refusing return. At this age, strength is measured by what you walk away from quietly. That night shaped every boundary afterward. I never went back, not physically or emotionally. Some places lose access permanently. That is not bitterness. It is wisdom earned through restraint, clarity, and the courage to leave once silence became the legacy and the final word of that night for my life.